He's favourite for the Supreme Novices Hurdle at the moment, but he wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea after that. Hi everybody, welcome back to the latest episode of The Jump Show. It is episode 2 of the 2025 Cheltenham Festival Ante-Post series. How are we, boys? Good to have you back along, Jake and Dan, once again. First up, Jake, I've got to compliment you on that delightfully glorious looking jumper. I have to say, it's very smart and pretty trendy.
Thank you very much, Bully. As we've mentioned before, we can always rely on you for a compliment, can't we?
Absolutely right, and fully
Such a kiss ass.
too. And Dan, great to have you on. I have to say, it's very exciting, isn't it, at the moment? Because we're in the lead up to your first proper appearance as a pundit on racing TV, which is coming at Wincanton very soon. Can't wait, and very well done for getting there. Hugely deserved.
Yeah, it still come as a bit of a shock, to be honest. I was asked about it just pre-Christmas. It was a nice Christmas treat, really. I kind of sat on it for a while. I just wanted to make sure it was actually going to happen. And in fact, I hadn't received some sort of practical joke email, which I hadn't made a million to one to be the case. But no, really happy. It's been something I've been trying to get to for a long time. I'm now just kind of excited about it. Like, I've been looking at the early entries, and it's actually a pretty decent card. It's a real good mix. I think it's one of the cards I'd love to get stuck into anyway. You've got like some 0 to 120s, which are kind of my like bread and butter. So really happy about it all. And thank you to everyone who's already sent some kind messages. I put a tweet out the other day about it and had a lot of people just reach out, say congratulations. So to anyone who did exactly that, I really appreciate it. It does mean a lot.
Yeah, for a lot of people who, I think a lot of pundits in the past who go to that kind of meeting have a 0 to 120. They're kind of looking at it thinking, oh, I've got to go through this one. But not you. You're going to be salivating
First,
chops.
first race of 3 mile 1, 0 to 120 novice handicap. And you got Welcome to Cartrees and Ideal to boards in there. Like, I think that's quality.
That is
That is quality.
Jake really means that as well. I love it. I did want to say actually before we start the show that thanks so much to you all at home for your massive support on episode 1 of the Ante-Post series. We did nearly 8,000 views and over 350 likes, loads of comments. So it was the most successful video we've ever had. And we'd just like to keep that going. We really would. A like goal of 200 likes would be great for episode 2. We'd obviously love to exceed that if possible, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please do. We got a few more subscriptions last week, and that was great to see. So more of those would be lovely. We'd love to chase down 2,500 subs before Cheltenham. Currently, I think Jake has crunched the numbers here. 72% of you watching haven't clicked the subscribe button. So there's a big area of improvement in that regard. So please do get involved and click the button. But thanks so much again for the support of last week. It was really great to see, and it's lovely to have that kind of reception. Right, we're going to go on to the weekend review before we get to our Ante-Post selections for week 2, because we actually got some racing, which was good. Not too much of it, but there was some great bit action. We're going to start by looking at one of the meetings that beat the Frost. That was Ffos Las and the Towton Novices Chase, which in the end, I think only 2 finished. But handstands jumped well and showed what a strong hand Ben Pauling has got in the Novice Chase division with the Jukebox Man as well, his other big graded contender. Jake, come to you first with handstands. He's very solid, isn't he? And I think he won that pretty well.
Yeah, he was a very good winner. Obviously, Ben Pauling was absolutely delighted with that, and so he should be. Went there, won the race really well. As you said, only 2 finished in the end, which was a bit disappointing just to see how he matched up against some of the others. I was kind of hoping it might be a race which produced a couple of, potential handicappers for Cheltenham. Didn't really seem to do that in the end, but handstands was a good winner. Ben Paulins kind of said after the race, though, that Silliars at Sandown next is going to be his next target. And he didn't really sound too keen on Cheltenham due to the way that he ran in the now Turner's Novice Hurdle last season. He kind of said that Aintree will probably be more his bag, but I think reading between the lines, the Silliars is the big target for him. And if they win that Grade 1, they'll be delighted. And looking through the current horses that we've got to go for that sort of race, he probably will end up being favourite, if not a short price in that race anyway. So yeah, good luck to them with that. And he looks like a very talented horse.
I think it's going to be a good piece of placing that from Ben Pauling. It looks a really good option, I think, that middle distance and a really solid chance of him getting that Grade 1 in the bag. Dan, to you, Fairyhouse on Saturday saw a couple of really good races. One of which was that very competitive beginner's chase in which Willie Mullins had a ridiculously strong hand. In the end, we saw Mr. Giff staying on strongly, really strongly actually, to beat Tully Hill and Asian Master. What did you make of the performance?
Yeah, the first four home, all trained by Willie Mullins. Obviously, the market support was mainly for Tully Hill and Asian Master. Mr. Giff has been talked up in smaller circles, perhaps, as being one to keep an eye on, but with the other two having chase experience, the other two seemingly preferred. But this was a really nice performance, I thought. It was ridden with relative restraint compared to what you'd normally see from an Irish beginner's chase. So, generally speaking, if you're not in the front four or five in a race like that, you're absolutely cooked from the start. And he was pretty well off the pace early doors. But jumped really well. His race IQ data read well. I think only Westport Cove gained more lengths jumping than he did, and Westport Cove was out in front. So that's naturally going to lend itself more to gaining lengths against the field. And interestingly, when you see a horse like that come from off the pace, you assume that there's been some sort of pace collapse. But the data doesn't bear that out at all. He had a finishing speed of 107%. The others were about 104, 103%. So it was a fairly run race, if that. Only really fairly run, you would say. So to come from where he did and win in the style that he did, you have to say that was really impressive. I guess the dilemma now is where do you go next? Because he's not in the Irish Arc at the Dublin Racing Festival. I couldn't really see any more viable graded targets sort of pre-Cheltenham, at least in Ireland. So maybe he comes across as something like the Kingmaker at Warwick, which would be timing-wise quite convenient. Start of February gives him plenty of time. Good break between Cheltenham as well, should that all go well. But he'd have to be considered as an each-way contender in an Arkle, even though we know that the likes of Sergino and Marjorie are going to probably take some beating at this stage. But he showed a lot of promise as a novice hurdler. I think his natural exuberance and love for jumping bore that out over fences. And yeah, he's seemingly a horse with a bright future and a great first ride for JJ Slevin as well, his first one for Willie Mullins. And it really was a well-timed ride as well.
Yeah, it was. It's funny how appearances can be deceiving because I said to you just before we came on, did this, that I thought they went quite hard up front in that race, but as you say, they didn't. And Mr. Gift just finished off really strongly. And I think it was a really nice performance, I have to say, because the second and third are definitely no mugs at all. Jake, back to you, throw it back to you for the novice chase that we saw at Punchestown on Sunday. And Lecky Watson, despite jumping pretty badly at a couple, including the last fence, did manage to pick up well and win.
Yeah, well, lucky for him, the rest jumped the last really badly as well, so he didn't have too much
Yeah,
problems at the
yeah.
end. But yeah, it was a good performance. Like he's looks a much better chase than he did a hurdler. I think there's clearly some improvement there. It visually looked like a bit of a performance like a stayer because at the end he was finishing strongly, ended up winning by 8 lengths. I kind of just feel like that maybe he is a 2.5 mile horse. I mean, after he made his debut in the beginners where he beat Slade Steele, that's kind of what Willie Mullins was alluding to, the fact that Paul Townend wouldn't mind if he went out and tripped the 3 miles, but he was kind of thinking that maybe 2.5 is the trip that he should have been running over all along. 'Cause obviously last season, he went to the the Albert Bartlett and races like that, and he just didn't really seem to quite get home. He obviously was quite keen over hurdles. Maybe fences have just calmed him down in that sense, but I think ultimately he'll probably end up going the Brown advisory route. I'd imagine that will be, the next port of call for him. I'd still kind of have some stamina doubts for him, just because of how he was in his novice hurdle campaign. And that, maybe they're just one or two too classy for him in that race anyway. But yeah, he's definitely a horse on the upgrade. And down memory lane is a kind of a horse who I thought would, develop into a proper novice handicap chase contender from this race. Kind of the way that he's finished it out, it didn't really scream that, that he's won for that race, but perhaps some quicker ground is just what he needs. If you look through his profile, all his best form has come on some, ground at least not as soft as that was. So perhaps some better ground in the spring will see him to better improvement. But I'd imagine that'll be the race they go for now with him because they're between a rock and a hard place, really, aren't they?
Yeah, just on Lecky Watson, I just for some reason I think he's a likable horse, but I don't think he's a Grade One horse. I think that's kind of his level, what we saw on Sunday, and he might be able to pick up a Grade Two somewhere. I just can't see him dining at the top table at the moment. Obviously, I could be wrong, but I'd be surprised at this stage if he's up to it. But we shall see, of course. Interesting was the Moscow Flyer Hurdle on Sunday. Willie Mullins has won this many times in the past, as we all know, with some very, very good horses. And Salvator Mundi was very well backed and sent off an odds-on favourite and a strong favourite to beat stablemate Callistois, which he did. But he did a few things wrong, Dan, and he's favourite for the Supreme Novices Hurdle at the moment. But he wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea after that.
Well, I think as Ruby said immediately after the race, I think he did everything wrong bar the winning part of the race, which ultimately is what's important. But the vibes were strong beforehand. He was strong in the betting for both this race and the Supreme the days leading up to it. And I think if you were a backer for either of those, you would not have been happy for 95% of that race. As you say, he was very keen early on. As a result, Paul Townend was almost just trying to rein him back, and that almost seemingly caused a few very sticky jumps. He was very slow at them, but it was almost Paul seemingly not wanting him to get ahead of himself. Like a good jump almost takes him forward, which he didn't really want. So that didn't help. And this was run at a real crawl. It was the identical time to the maiden hurdle that followed. Salvatore Mundi had a finishing speed of 112.6%. So to be keen, jump really poorly, but to show that turn of foot coming from off the pace of a solid run race, you have to mark that up quite significantly. Like he was 1.3 seconds quicker than Kelsois in the final 3 furlongs. Like that's a significant margin for a sprint of that nature in a race like that. Now look, 3 to 4 to 1 range, that's short enough. I'd probably have Romeo Coolio a bit closer in the betting, bearing in mind he's about double the price now. I think when you look at what he achieved over Christmas and the manner in which he did it, he's already got the experience. I'd say they should be a lot closer together. But the more I do think about it, the more I can see why that price isn't perhaps the worst in the world. I don't think you'd be rushing to back him at that now. But I think undoubtedly, based on what the vibes were, this seemingly is the number one for the Supreme. And obviously, the Dublin Racing Festival is going to bore us out a bit more. Obviously, Cubbeck de Board and Cade Doughty, both in the 2 mile Grade 1 there. Could one of them be impressive and maybe overtake Salvatore Mundi in terms of the Supreme thinking? Perhaps. But they could also go for the Turners, where it really is looking quite barren for Willie Mullins at the minute. You look at the top of the betting, he doesn't really have anything in there. So perhaps if they win in the manner of a stare at the Dublin Race Festival, they become the number one for the Turners. I think he did, as you say, Bully, he did a lot wrong. He somehow managed to win and win fairly impressively in the end, but he's really going to have to brush a lot up come Cheltenham. And obviously, that's going to be the debate from here to now. Obviously, you can say, obviously, he has to improve and he should improve, but that's absolutely no guarantee. And obviously, it's quite easy to get lit up round Cheltenham as well. There's no guarantee he settles there. It's one of those where quite happy to leave it for now. Obviously, the Dublin Race Festival will inform us more about the pecking order of the Willie Mullins novice hurdlers. But it should be, and I imagine it would continue to be, one of the hot debating points all the way up to March.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. And Jake, just looking at the Supreme Novices Hurdle betting, there's only 4 horses shorter than 20 to 1 at the moment. And that is exactly what Dan was saying. There's no real kind of flagship contenders yet. It does look pretty open. I know that's often the case at this time of year, but even so, I would say it looks more open than usual, perhaps for mid-January.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, it is a very open year. And I think it's kind of what I said about the new Lion last week. Like, he has to be that short now just because there's no other stand-up performers. And, you can see why people were trying to get on at prices beforehand. He started the week at 10 to 1. As soon as he got entered for the Moscow Flyer, he was back, all the way into 6 to 1 straight away. So people were obviously keen to see that he was out and alive. And, he's definitely did that. I think there are quite a number of red flags around him, just from the sense that Patrick Mullins' interview afterwards, he said about how he wears the tongue tie. And, you kind of get the vibes that they do worry about his breathing. They want him on some quicker ground to help with that. They want obviously a stronger pace to help with both his jumping and his keenness here. I think that he's definitely a horse I'm going to be keeping an eye on. And if nothing else comes out of the woodwork, you can start looking at the 7 to 2 prices as a decent price. But as of right now, I think it is poor value, and you can, as Dan said, just have a bit of patience with it and just wait and see how it develops. I don't think you need to rush to back that now. If you're on a decent price, obviously you'll be in a happy position there. But I just have that one, small doubt of if he does go into a stronger run race at the Supreme, like with Dysart Dynamo a couple of years ago, like you just can't be keen like that in a strongly run race like a Grade 1 Supreme. You can be, you can get away with being keen here in a Grade 2 where perhaps you're not running up against some decent horses. But if you go to a Grade 1 and you're keen again, that would be my big doubt with him, and that obviously will be what everybody's talking about when they want to either take him on or back him for the Supreme. So as Dan said, it will be a talking horse, and we love having talking horses on podcasts like this.
Yeah, we certainly do. Part of the reason, actually, Jake, why I'm such a big fan of Romeo Coolio in general, I think he's just so straightforward. He channels his energy really well during his races, and I think he's learned that from his bumper career, and he just looks so solid now. And talking of hype horses, he was always a massive one, wasn't he, in his bumper days? I mean, Gordon Elliott's always thought a huge amount of him, and I think he's starting to prove that now. I think he's a really solid play for whatever race he goes for. If it is the Supreme, I really like Romeo Coolio as a horse. And you mentioned hype horses there, Jake. Dan, Lou Lambert, 4-1 favourite for the Triumph Hurdle. I haven't seen him yet.
Yeah, this is desperate stuff. This is just absolutely pathetic. This is rumours and whispers going into overdrive. The market lacking a real kind of Irish standout contender. Obviously, Willie the Halls let it down. Nothing really over Christmas that you'd be galvanised by. Typical defensive anti-post pricing. This is the result. You end up with a 4-1 favourite who won impressively over in France, but then was obviously due to run at the weekend and abandoned. And yeah, he's now just artificially that price. Let's not forget, Sugino was not exactly the most impressive on his hurdling debut when he came over to Britain either. I think if you're taking the 4-1, I would suggest some examinations of the head are required. If you had the 20-1, it was probably a fair enough speculative bet based on the entry and based on the market being weak. But if you're backing him all the way down to fours, I've got some snake oil to sell you, I think.
I think people look at it. I think people look at it and see the Donnelly Silks and see the 2 mile trip and see Nicky Henderson and think, oh, he's the next coming. That's what it is. It's just as simple as that.
I'd love to know how much they've taken on like 5-6 to 1 inwards. I imagine it's not all that much. I imagine it's almost like desperate. Everything's getting back. It must be really good. Like I doubt there's been all that much to move it this far. I say at the earlier like 2016 to 1. If you're kind of see there are more French followers these days than ever. At that kind of price, you can almost justify a bit of a punt in a market that is lacking a real standout at the minute. But to have him as favourite now is just absolutely farcical.
The best thing though was, did you hear the John Bond rumor?
No, what was that?
So some story started doing the rounds that apparently he worked all over John Bond in a
Right.
gallop at home. It's just the funniest story ever, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tale
They
as
give
old as
Constitution
time.
a wave as well. Just giving him one of these, yeah. Deary me, and you believe anything, wouldn't you?
Oh, the old work as well as. Yeah, it doesn't get old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chasing pigeons, etc., etc.
Yeah, I mean, once again, though, Jake has shown that he's got his ear to the grindstone. If there's a man who knows about news, it is Jake Price Racing.
Even if it's absolute bollocks, he knows about it.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Hopefully, though, Jake, your updates for us this week aren't bollocks.
No, yeah, we've got some actual certified news to give you. Obviously, the Grade 1 entries came out for the Gold Cup, Ryanair, and Champion Chase this week. I'm sure most of you have seen them by now, but amongst a few surprises, there weren't too many. But Spillane Tower and I Know the Way You're Thinking weren't entered in the Gold Cup. A few people fancied them, so that would be a bit of a surprise. Spillane Tower only has the Ryanair as his option, so that's seemingly where he's going to turn up before going back to Punchestown. And then obviously Le Homme Press was another horse that had been kind of spoken about after the King George as a Ryanair contender, but he wasn't giving an entry. Ilate Tompt wasn't given an entry across the whole of the festival, so perhaps we won't see him now until Punchestown, or perhaps he's out for the season. We haven't really had confirmation on that. Shannon Royale was another horse who was well touted for the National Hunt Chase, but as it stands, he just won't be able to run in the race because he was given a BHA mark of 148 in the Abandoned Classic Chase this week. And finally, just to make sure everyone's aware, the Champion Hurdle, the Mares Hurdle, and the Stayers Hurdle entries are out this week, so we'll see if there's any surprises in those divisions.
Will you be pounding the keyboard, Jake, as you always are with those entries?
I might be doing that, Tom, yeah.
And do you know what? Actually, it's rather nice, isn't it, Dan, that Frank Berry and JP McManus have made it less of a guessing game as it regards Spillane Tower. We're so used to not knowing which target is going to have which horse, but actually, even in just one race, it makes it all rather easy.
Is he a certainty to run the Ryanair, though?
Oh.
We go Punchestown Gold Cup's there crying out for him. Energy there. I wouldn't say it's 100% he goes there, but I mean, if you're a Factor File Ryanair backer, I guess you're a bit more nervous now than you were before the entries come out, aren't you?
Yeah, big time. Okay, that's the news. Before we move on to our Ante-Post selections for the week, it's competition results time.
Yeah, so courtesy of race sponsors Unibet, we had 2 pairs of tickets to give away for Trials Day at Cheltenham. Obviously, that featured the Unibet Hurdle, and that was on Saturday, the 25th of January. And we have the results right now.
Yeah, thank you to all 72 of you who entered. A really good turnout, but there can only be 2 winners. So who are they, Jake?
The lucky winners are Chaz Vale, 3015, and Johnny Hennessy, 9658. So well done to you two.
Yeah, congratulations. And please be sure we will be in contact in the comments to obviously notify that you've won as well. Please try and get back in touch with us within 48 hours, because obviously we have had issues in the past where people haven't necessarily responded. We may have to redraw in case you don't get back to us in 48 hours. But hopefully you do, and hopefully you have a great day at the track.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a cracking prize to win. So well done, Chaz Veal, and well done, John Hennessy. Yeah, a lovely Philip, no doubt, for your January. Keep an eye out for more competitions. They will be coming soon. Now, let's move on, shall we, to this week's Ante-Post Selections. It's week number 2. And first up, we're going straight to Jake.
I'm actually going to be going to a performance that happened over the weekend, and you might be wondering why it was left out of the running order, and that was purely on purpose because I want to be selfish and take all the credit myself here.
What else
But
is
I
new?
was, but I was looking at the mare's maiden hurdle at Fairyhouse on Saturday, 2 mile 2 furlongs, and I thought that 6.5 put in an absolutely fantastic performance on her hurdles debut. Look, I've been a long time admirer of Caroline Bamboo in the mare's novice division. I'm kind of, waiting to see what she does next time. I wouldn't rule out ever putting her up on this series, but I really want to go see her go win well next time. And I think she's kind of almost running out of time because the Solarina would obviously be a normal target for a Willie Mullins mare at this stage of the season, and she's not even won a maiden yet. So I've kind of put her on the back burner for now. But as I said, I was really impressed by 6.5. It was a decent race on paper. Colimeter was in there, whose form ties in with Caroline Bamboo. We had a new French recruit called Kimi Demai for Willie Mullins as well. So it looked a decent race on paper. But 6.5 absolutely destroyed them. It was quite a slowly run race to begin with. 6.5 though, she literally needed one squeeze turning for home to get upside Colimeter, who was setting the pace. And then she just went away under hands and heels, scooted away to win really easily. I thought it was just a tremendous performance. I think she's now into 8-1, which is probably at the lower end of, especially at this time of year, a bet that I'd put up. But I was kind of looking through all the markets, and I kind of want to leave handicaps for another week. I think that I've got loads on my short list for each race, but I think I just want a bit more information before I start getting into the handicaps. So I really wanted to find a grade 1 bet. And obviously that they are few and far to come between. And once she puts in a performance like this, you can see why she's shortened so much in the market. But it was a really impressive performance, as I've mentioned. She jumped really quickly. She's quickened away, and she's a really flat, really classy flat performer as well, isn't she? She's rated 94 in that sphere. I don't think many mares in the market currently would be able to reach that sort of level on the flat. She was third in the Iris Azarowicz on her last start, and that's kind of why she's only just getting going over hurdles now. She was giving a bit of an extended break because that was only in October. So she's had that nice extended break, and she's just getting going over hurdles. And as I said, it was the perfect start for her. Um, I think also another thing to note with her is that a lot of mares novice hurdles, you do need to stay the 2 mile 1 furlong really strongly, if not stay further. Obviously, we've had the likes of You Wear It Well, Love Envoi in recent years where they've won over further and dropped back in trip. I like that angle with her because this race that she won was 2 miles 2.5 furlongs. She stays 2 miles on the flat, so that she'll have no problem staying 2.5 in time as well. But I think that, sensibly that the Solarina Novice Hurdle will probably be the next target. The only problem with that is it's only in a couple of weeks. It's on the 25th of January. So whether that comes too soon or not will be the only issue. But Gavin Conroy said after the race that, the Mare's Novice is definitely the target for her. And I can't see how she won't be going there. If you look through the market, Marine is currently the favourite still. She's not been seen for over a year now, 365 days since her bumper win tomorrow, or the day this podcast gets released. And, the excuses for her not running in the autumn were that she wasn't firing yet. So it's not exactly something you want to be hearing from a Willie Mullins horse, is it? Jubilee Alpha's in there. I didn't think she won the strongest contest at Taunton. And then Kientzheim was in there as well, quite short. But she was made to work really hard by Bo Qualley at Kempton. So again, that's not exactly form that you would, want to set your hat on. Other than the French horses that haven't ran in the division, though, like Charisma, Karma Dairy, Riscabahia, I don't think there's any horses that, really have the type of class that she does. As I said, 94 on the flat. Perhaps one of those will show their hand and show to be really good. But I think that at 8-1, I think it's probably worth taking now because I think she's that type of horse that will just keep shortening, even if she's not running. One of these other horses, if they come out and get beaten, I think you could see her shorten and shorten. And if she wins again, say she won the Solarina, she'd be a very short price favorite for the race. So yeah, 6.5. She's shorter than what I've normally put up this time of year, but I just think that she is going to be the captain of my team.
The captain of the Jake's ship. Good to see. 6.5, yeah. I thought very impressive. I thought she made Qualamita look, slow as an oak tree. And to be fair,
Yeah.
that takes some doing. I know that Qualamita might not be top class, but even so, I'd say that takes some doing. But Jake, I don't want anything said about Jubilee Alpha because she's one of my horses to follow. And I
I know
still
she is, Bully.
retain plenty of hope about her. So fingers
I think
crossed.
she's a quick mare, but I just
Mm.
I think that 6.5 could outstay her up the hill, if you know what I mean.
What I'm rather hoping is that it's not just a Taunton victory that she has to show for come the end of the season, because
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
that would be a little bit disappointing. Jake, 6.5 for you. Dan, over to you for your week two selection.
Yeah, Jake said he needs to wait another week for handicaps. I'm already kind of on that ship already, and I think part of that's my methodology is I do like to go for those. Probably I almost set myself an imposed limit of 16 to 1 or bigger. Obviously, if there is a standout bet that's slightly shorter, I will obviously go for that. But I do like to try and exploit those at the bigger prices, and that is becoming more and more difficult with the way these races are priced up. So I ended up in the Martin Pipe, the last race of the week, and I just had another look at it, and I just was firmly of the opinion that the new 5 run rule for the novice hurdlers is going to really affect this race. And I did some analysis before, or just after the changes came out when we looked at it. Obviously, for the front three all last year would have been ruled out. They only had 4 runs. 40% of the top 4 in the last 10 years wouldn't have qualified for the race under the new conditions. Like, that is the most affected race by a country mile in terms of that. And you're looking at the way this season's panned out, particularly say with Willie Mullins horses, haven't got going until very late. So many are going to struggle to get to those 5 runs in early, which is really going to make this race pretty sparse in terms of the novice companies. So those who are already qualified or on their way to getting qualified are going to make plenty of appeal. And one who's already had the 5 runs and achieved a very good level of form in those 5 runs is Manila Sixo for Gordon Elliott, who we know always targets this race. He ended a 6-year barren spell with better days ahead last season. And you look at the profile of his winners, and in general with Martin Pipe horses, they are typically stayers. The better days ahead won a maiden hurdle over just shy of 3 miles. Blow by Blow did likewise. Champagne Classic run over an extended 3 miles in a maiden before winning over 2 miles 6.5. Say stamina laden horses. The Martin Pipe, because of the conditional jockeys race, tends to become a real stamina test of the trip. And Manila Sixo, I would say, looks just like those that come before him. He actually did win his maiden over 2 miles, where he jumped markedly out to his right. Then went to Cheltenham. Obviously, that was a main concern there, going left-handed. Would he jump right-handed there? But actually jumped pretty straight. He just happened to bump into Potter's Charm on that occasion, who's gone on to frank that form in no uncertain terms. And he shaped like a stayer that day, Miller 6-0 on decent ground, like he was kind of off it for about a mile from home, but really kept on well up the hill and made Potter's Charm work for that. That was not a gimme for him. It's probably almost the hardest he's had to work in a race. I'd say he probably actually wasn't as pushed as hard as he was in the Grade 1 at Aintree. So that looks a really solid run. The distant third hacked up in a maiden hurdle next time out was actually tried in the Challow hurdle thereafter, and he was getting £5 from another 6. So I think you can make that form looked pretty standout in the context of this race at an early stage. Then went to Thurles and won over 2 miles 7. He was second in the Grade 3 at Cork over 3 miles. The same race Cool Survivor was second in. He went off favourite for a pipe not too long ago. Lassie finishing third in the Grade 2 at Limerick over Christmas that was won by the Big Westerner, who's emerged as an early Albert Bartlett favourite. Splitting Mozzie's sister and Fleur in the Park, who tie in very closely with the Yellow Clay. Obviously, who's tasted Grade 1 successes towards the head of the market for the Turners. So all these form lines are all, I know it's still a couple of months to go, but they're all starting to stack up in his favour here. So that was the same race that Stella Story and Answer to Cave had run in previously. So that, again, is a bit of a trial for that race. Deafy Blue had been second in it before placing in a pipe. Delta Work was second in it before winning the Martin Pipe. Now, he was entered in a Pertemps qualifier at Warwick, obviously the abandoned Warwick card. He's rated 133 in Ireland, got a mark of 137 in the UK. Now, you can read that entry in the Pertemps qualifier one of two ways. It could just be mark fishing. They could be planning to go down the Pertemps route. Both possible, and I accept that's part of the risk here. But I also think there's probably a good few more horses they can run in the Pertemps. There aren't that many they may be able to run in the pipe at this rate. The only one would be the Gigginstown horse that ran in the main hurdle over Christmas. His name escapes me. But to me, he would be out of his ground in any kind of handicap. He looks far too big and raw. So as it stands, this is the only real qualifier for that. And I'd say he still looks fairly treated on what he's achieved on that mark 137, especially when you look at that Potter's Charm form line. Say this tends to be dominated by Irish novices. Danny Gilligan rode him at Cheltenham, which I find interesting. He won the race last year on better days ahead, and I think under the conditions he is still eligible to run, or ride it rather, in the Martin Pipe, and he would be a standout jockey in a race of that nature. I think there's an awful lot to like about his profile. And obviously, there's some water to flow under that bridge yet. He could run in the Nathaniel Lacey where he's entered. There's a few races he could go for. I don't think they're going to overly expose him in the meantime, given he already has that mark and a lot of experience under his belt. But given that he's 20-1 now, and given that I think a lot of those towards the head of the betting and those who are going to be fancy for this won't be able to run in it, I think he absolutely has the profile of a horse who could well go off favourite around the 5-1-4 to 1 mark based on how this race may cut up.
We know it's the Ante-Post series really taking off when Dan Overall goes for the handicaps, and here
And
we
you
are.
don't have to wait long generally. But hey, that's what I'm good at. Like 2 handicap winners last year, and obviously some are very snippy about how can you possibly bet in the handicaps? It's so early. If you haven't got marks, you don't have field, etc. Well, you look for the profiles of horses that are going to shorten. Of course, you take a risk, but I mean, if Millennium 60 turns up in that race, there is not a chance with that profile. Irish trained novice Gordon Elliott, run at Cheltenham behind Potter's Charm, stays profile of a stayer. There's not a chance he's 20 to 1. Like he is head of the betting material all day.
Some will say I went too early last week with Olympic Man in the handicap section, but
And you told them.
I stand by it. And you know what? It wasn't quite within your 16 to 1 parameter there, Dan. At 14 to 1, I just missed out. But there you go.
That's just
Now,
snippy
there's a
Ante-Post pricing.
Yeah, absolutely. You've cheaped out there, bully. Come on.
No, I haven't. Also, actually, what I wanted to mention as well, interesting that you say that, Dan, about going for handicaps early. But if you look at a lot of those graded races, it is quite hard to find a selection if there's a hot favourite. For example, look at the Champion Hurdle, and you've gone to Constitution Hill. I mean, there's not a huge amount of point unless you really fancy a horse up against him for putting one up. So you do have to look elsewhere in this Ante-Post
Yeah.
series, and handicaps are the obvious place.
Well, Gold Cup, where'd you go, really? Where'd you go in with that? Champion Chase, again, only a couple can win that. They're already priced in, really. You've got obviously Ryanair's open, which I had a stab at last week. That's always a race you can't have a stab. Stayers Hurdle's open to a certain extent. Arkle's dominated by 2 horses as it stands. Is anything outside of that really in the realms of a bet that gets you excited? Probably not. So there are really limited options, and the handicaps are just more fun.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then you move to the novice hurdles, and there's just like any
geez.
number of horses that you could go for in any of the races, and half of them we haven't even seen yet.
Yeah, which brings
Exactly.
me nicely onto my selection this week, which comes in my. So I'm going to the Albert Bartlett for my selection, and I spent quite a lot of the day actually going through the Albert Bartlett. I don't really know why, but I just picked on the race.
It's a sad life, bully.
Yes.
And I thought I was bad looking at the Martin Pipe market.
It's funny because I sort of flitted between a few runners in the race. Super Sunday was my original selection, but having watched his races back, I think he is going to be a good horse, but he just needs to learn to settle. He's been too keen in his last couple of outings, and even though he finished well behind the Yellow Clay and the Laurels and Ace last time, he just didn't settle well enough, and obviously that was over 2.5. So I just worry he stepped up to 3. He's one of the market leaders for the Nathaniel Lacey behind Final Demand, another one of Willie Mullins's. I just fear in the finish over a trip 2 miles 6 beyond, he might not get home given the fact he's a bit keen. But if he learns to settle, I think he's a good horse. So anyway, having looked around, I looked through the Nathaniel Lacey entries, and Final Demands had just the one start at Limerick under rules so far, and he was very impressive, but he's got a lot to do, and nothing else really appealed to me. Pray Tell potentially, but he's had a few runs now, looks quite exposed. I thought it was his best start last time over 3 miles. That was a really impressive turn of foot I thought he showed at the end of the race. But I don't think he's an Albert Bartlett winner in waiting. So I've gone down another route, and a mare who's got a slightly different profile, actually. That is the Big Westerner, who's currently second in the market behind the Yellow Clay, who actually is more likely to go for the Turners route. So we could easily have the Big Westerner start off favourite on the day. Particularly because she's unlikely to run again before the race. I thought she might potentially go for the Mercedes-Benz, as it looked like a good spot for her timing-wise. But I know that Henry de Bromhead, Dan was telling me earlier, has come out and said that she's likely to go straight to Cheltenham for the Albert Bartlett. So I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Obviously, Henry's won the race in the past. Minella did the business. The reason I thought perhaps the Mercedes-Benz might be an option is that Henry's won it 4 times in the last 10 years. So if she does turn up there, I think she'd have a very good chance of winning, and I hope she would win if she's going to be an Albert Bartlett contender. But it looks as though she's going to go straight to Cheltenham. She's a mare who's had 3 starts so far, 200 rules. Her point victory came at Ballycahane when she beat Jasmine Derry, who then went and won her bumper. She's not performed much yet for Harry Derham, her new stable. She's had 1 start, which is quite disappointing, 4th. But at least she won her bumper, so the form looks okay there. And she was very strong at the line. That came over 3 miles. Henry de Bromhead is no stranger to starting out horses over hurdles rather than going down the bumper route if he thinks they're ready. She's already 6, and as a result, I think they wanted to get going over hurdles and over a trip as well, because she made her maiden hurdle debut at Punchestown over 2 miles, 5.5 furlongs. That came in November, where she beat Argento Boy. Now, Argento Boy wouldn't be one of Willie Mullins's star horses, but he was thought good enough to run the champion bumper at the Cheltenham Festival last year. Was down the field then, but he's definitely got talent, and she beat him fair and square over what is a trip probably shorter of her ideal and off the back of what was quite a long break, her first start for de Bromhead. So it was a very encouraging performance, and she improved loads on that when winning at Limerick over Christmas in Grade 2 company, beating Mozzie's sister. She was well back to do that, so went off 7-4 favourites. There was lots of support throughout the day for her. And that came in the Jaguar Land Rover Novice Hurdle. And it's been a good point to the Albert Bartlett in the past. A few winners have come out of that, or a few have run well and come out and run well in the Albert Bartlett. So that was good to see. She's a very, very strong mare. She's big, she's sizable, and she's actually a half-sister to Stay Away Faye too, who of course won the Albert Bartlett Novices Hurdle. So the pedigree is all there. And the further she goes, the better she looks. She was very strong at the line in that Grade 2 contest. And I love the way that she's only had the 3 starts so far, 2 in Rules Company, but she already looks very straightforward. She looks as though there's not a bother on her, and she has the kind of sort of aptitude I think you need for an Albert Bartlett type race where you need to travel, settle well, and then have superior stamina. So she makes a lot of appeal to me at around about 12-1. She is currently for the Albert Bartlett. The Yellow Clays, as I said, is favourite. Might well go the Turner's route. And then you look further down the list, you've got Final Demand, who, as I said, goes to Nathaniel Lacey. Probably does. He could be anything for Willie Mullins, but until they prove it in graded company, I'd be a little bit cautious about following that one in. The fact that the Big Western has already been to graded company and done it, and looks to have a pretty upwardly mobile profile, would put her above him in my list. And then if you look further down, I mentioned Super Sunday as a horse that I like, but I just don't think he's going to settle well enough. There's a couple in there. Jet Blue, I thought was quite impressive at Cheltenham last time. Cocktail Divan, we haven't seen that one enough yet to make a strong opinion of how he's going to get on. But I thought of what I've seen so far in the market and what I've seen on the racecourse, the Big Western have made most appeal. And a stamina test like the Albert Bartlett is going to be right up her street. The pedigree, everything about it suggests that she's going to really love that kind of test. So she'd be my second week bet in that Albert Bartlett at around about 12-1. So there you go. 3 Ante-Post selections put up for week 2. And Jake, wouldn't it be nice to get a similar kind of viewership as last week? Because we absolutely flew, didn't we, in the figures?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, it was our best performing video so far. So let's try and keep that upward trajectory, as you were talking about, going for our videos.
Now, Bully, can you make me a promise?
Go on.
If someone comments about the Big Westerner being a bad bet, no getting snippy in the comments. Let it go.
I'll try my best.
Let it flow. Channel your inner zen and be happy.
You know what was annoying actually about that last week? Because when I replied with that comment, is that I reckon I replied with like 4 short lines of text, and it was more articulate than I could manage in what I said on the show in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, but you spent about 4 hours preparing that reply just to make sure you got it right.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm surprised you didn't mention with the Big Westerner who she's a half sister to.
I did. Stay away, Faye.
No, I did. Oh, I tuned out.
I don't blame you. You and much of the audience.
I was just like, I was there, like thinking, surely he's got to mention this. Right? Yeah, I must have been daydreaming, just thinking about your inevitable arguments with the people in the comments.
You were just dreaming about the Martin pipe.
Exactly.
Always.
Yeah. Oh, Jake, you know what? I'm glad someone was listening, so thanks, mate. Right, excellent stuff. That brings us to the end of week 2 of the Ante-Post series. Please do remember to like, as we say, if you enjoyed the video. We'd love to get to 200 likes for episode 2. And subscribe if you haven't already. We're not far off 2,500. Until next time on The Jump Show, it's goodbye from all of us.